Hey, Candace here. Welcome to lesson number 2 in module 2. In this lesson, we are talking about how to turn off the struggle switch. And don't worry, I know you don't know what the struggle switch is, but trust me, it's something that you do want to know about and you do want to know how to handle. Alright, so let's get right into it. Have you ever seen one of those old cowboy movies where the bad guy falls into a pool of quicksand and the more he struggles, the faster it sucks him under? If you ever fall into quicksand, struggling is the worst thing you can do. What you're supposed to do is lie back, stretch out, keep still, and let yourself float on the surface. And then whistle for your horse to come and rescue you. This takes real presence of mind, of course, because every instinct in your body tells you to struggle. But the more you struggle, the worse your situation becomes. And the same principle applies to difficult feelings. The more we struggle with them, the more trouble we create for ourselves. Now, why should this be? Why does this happen? Well, imagine that at the back of your mind is a switch. We'll call it the struggle switch. When it's switched on, it means we're going to struggle against physical or emotional pain that comes our way. Whatever discomfort we experience, we'll see it as a problem and try hard to get rid of it or avoid it. Suppose the emotion that shows up is anxiety, for example. If our struggle switch is on, then that feeling is completely unacceptable to us. So we could end up with anger about our anxiety, thinking, how dare they make me feel like this? Or anxiety about our anxiety, this can't be good for me, I wonder what it's doing to my body. Or guilt about our anxiety, thinking, I shouldn't let myself get so worked up, I'm acting like a child. Or maybe even a mixture of all these feelings at once. What all these secondary emotions have in common is that they are unpleasant, unhelpful, and a drain on our energy and vitality. And then we may get angry or anxious or depressed about that. See the vicious cycle? Now imagine what happens if our struggle switch is off. In this case, whatever emotion shows up, no matter how unpleasant, we don't struggle with it. So when anxiety shows up, it's not a problem. Sure, it's unpleasant and we don't like it, but it's nothing terrible. When the struggle switch is off, our anxiety levels are free to rise and fall as the situation dictates. Sometimes they'll be high, sometimes low, and sometimes there will be no anxiety at all. But more importantly, we're not wasting our time and energy struggling with it. Without struggle, what we get is a natural level of physical and emotional discomfort, depending on who we are and the situation we're in. So let's call this clean discomfort. Clean discomfort. There's no avoiding clean discomfort. Life serves it up to all of us in one way or another. But once we start struggling with it, our discomfort levels increase rapidly, and all that additional suffering we call dirty discomfort. Dirty discomfort. Our struggle switch is like an emotional amplifier. Switch on, and we can have anger about our anxiety about our anger, depression about our depression, or guilt about our guilt, right? Everything becomes amplified. We could even have guilt about our anger, about our anxiety, and then depression about that. It seems never ending. And it doesn't stop there. With our struggle switch on, we are completely unwilling to accept the presence of these uncomfortable feelings, which means not only do we get distressed by them, we also do whatever we can to avoid or get rid of them. For some people, this means turning to drugs, alcohol, gambling, or food. Others may turn to TV, books, or computer games. Humans find an almost infinite number of ways to try to avoid or get rid of unpleasant feelings, from smoking to shopping, from sex to surfing the internet. As we talked about before, most of these control strategies are no big deal as long as they're used in moderation. However, any of them is problematic if used excessively or inappropriately. It can lead to addictions, relationship issues, health problems, or just wasting time. All of these secondary problems and the painful feelings associated with them fall under dirty discomfort. Okay, so With the struggle switch off, our emotions are free to move. We don't waste time and energy fighting or avoiding them. We don't generate all that dirty discomfort. With the struggle switch on, our emotions are stuck. We waste a huge amount of time and energy struggling with them. We create a lot of painful and unhelpful, dirty discomfort. To help illustrate this, let's look at an example from one of my clients. So Rachel suffered from panic disorder. She suffered from sudden episodes of overwhelming fear, panic attacks, right? During a panic attack, she'd have an intense feeling of impending doom associated with distressing sensations like breathlessness, chest pain, a thumping heart, choking, dizziness, tingling in her hands and feet, hot and cold flushes, sweating, faintness, and troubling. Rachel's problem was actually her intense dislike of anxiety. She thought anxiety is something terrible and dangerous, and she would do anything possible to avoid it. So as soon as she felt any sensation that remotely resembled anxiety, like her heart beating faster, that sensation itself would trigger further anxiety for her. And then as her anxiety level rose, those unwanted sensations grew even stronger. And this in turn triggered more anxiety until soon she was in a state of full-blown panic. At a certain point, Rachel's world began shrinking. She avoided drinking coffee, watching scary movies, or doing any physical exercise because all those things made her heart beat faster, which would then set off that vicious cycle. And at one point, Rachel also refused to ride in elevators and airplanes, drive on busy roads, visit crowded shopping centers, or attend large social gatherings. Again, because she knew she might feel anxious in those situations, and anxiety was something she wanted to avoid at any cost. Now, maybe Rachel's case is a bit more extreme, but we all do the same thing. All of us at times avoid challenges in order to escape the stress or anxiety that goes with them. In moderation, this isn't a problem, but the more extensive the avoidance becomes, the more we start to suffer in the long run. Now, I can just hear you saying, that all makes sense, but how can I stop struggling with difficult feelings when they feel so bad? Well, the answer to that is a simple technique we're going to learn called expansion. Before we get into expansion, though, it's important for you to know how the struggle switch developed in the first place so that you'll have a better idea and understanding of how to turn it off. So I'm going to read over a list of emotions, and I want you to just notice, without thinking too hard about it, which ones you automatically judge as good or positive, and which ones you automatically judge as bad or negative. Okay? Fear, anger, shock, disgust, sadness, guilt, love, joy, curiosity. Most people tend to automatically judge the first 5 or 6 emotions as bad or negative, right? From fear all the way to guilt. And they judge the last 3 as good or positive: love, joy, curiosity. But why is this so? Why do we judge some as good and some as bad? Well, it's largely because of the stories we believe about emotions, because of the stories we tell ourselves. I mean, think back to your childhood. What were you told about the best way to handle your emotions? What emotions did your family freely express? What emotions did your family suppress or frown upon? How did the adults in your family handle their own so-called negative emotions? What emotional control strategies did they use? As a result of all this programming, what ideas are you still carrying around today about your emotions and how to handle them? Another reason we tend to judge emotions as bad or negative is because they feel unpleasant. They create uncomfortable sensations in our bodies. We don't like those sensations, so we don't want them. On the other hand, we do like pleasant sensations, so naturally we want more of them. If you judge an emotion as good, you'll probably try hard to get more of it. And if you judge it as bad, you're apt to try even harder to get rid of it. Therefore, judging sets you up for a struggle with your feelings. Judging sets you up for a struggle with your feelings. Just because some sensations and urges are uncomfortable doesn't mean they're bad. For example, if you grew up in a family where people didn't openly express love and affection, then you may find loving feelings uncomfortable. Does that mean loving feelings are bad? And isn't it interesting that people judge fear as a bad emotion, yet they'll pay good money to watch a horror movie or to read a thriller precisely to experience that very feeling? So no emotion is in and of itself bad. Bad is just a thought. If we literally believe that the feeling is bad, then naturally we're going to struggle with it all the harder. Any diffusion strategy can help you deal with unhelpful thoughts about your feelings. That's why we covered the diffusion module first. For example, suppose your mind says, "This anxiety is terrible." You could then say to yourself, "I'm having the thought that this anxiety is terrible." Or simply label them. Each time you notice a judgment, you silently say to yourself, "Judging." Acknowledge its presence. Recognize that it's only words and let it be. Judging is one of the most common ways our mind adds to our emotional discomfort. However, there's plenty of others. Why don't we go through a few of them now so that you can recognize these in yourself when they come up. One of the most common ones is when we'll ask ourselves, why am I feeling like this? This question sets you up to run through all your problems one by one, to see if you can pinpoint what caused your feelings. Naturally, this just makes you feel worse because it creates the illusion that your life is nothing but problems. It also leads to a lot of time in unpleasant thoughts. And does that help you take action to change your life for the better? Right? You always want to ask yourself, is this helping me to be the person that I want to be? People ask this question because they think if they can figure out why they're feeling so bad, they'll be able to figure out a way to feel better. Unfortunately, the strategy almost always backfires. And the truth is that in most cases, it doesn't really matter that much exactly why these unpleasant feelings arose in the first place. What matters is how you respond to them. The basic fact is always this: what you are feeling is what you are feeling. So if you can learn how to accept your feelings without having to analyze them, you'll save yourself a lot of time and effort. Another question that people often ask themselves is, what have I done to deserve this? What have I done to deserve this? And this question sets you up for self-blame. You rehash all the so-called bad things that you've done so that you can figure out why the universe decided to punish you. And as a result, you end up feeling worthless, useless, bad, or inadequate. And again, does this help you in any practical way? Why am I like this? This question leads you to search through your entire life history, looking for the reasons why you are the way you are. This often leads to feelings of anger, resentment, and hopelessness, and it often ends in blaming your parents. Again, does this help you in any practical way? Thinking, I can't handle this. Variations of this include, I can't stand it, I can't cope, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown, and so on. Your mind is basically feeding you the story that you're too weak to handle this, and something bad is going to happen if you keep feeling this way. Is that a helpful story to pay attention to? Thinking, I shouldn't feel like this. Here your mind picks an argument with reality, right? The reality is the way you are feeling right now is the way you are feeling. But your mind says, reality is wrong. It's not supposed to be this way. Stop it. Give me the reality I want. Of course, this kind of argument never ends in your favor. So does this change anything? Thinking, I wish I didn't feel like this. I wish I didn't feel like this. Wishful thinking is one of the mind's favorite pastimes. I wish I felt more confident. I wish I didn't feel so anxious. This can keep us wrapped up in second-guessing ourselves for hours, imagining how our lives could be so much better if only we felt differently. The list really could go on and on. These are some of the most common ones that I've experienced and that I hear out of the mouths of other people. Let's just say the thinking self has lots of ways to intensify our bad feelings or to get us to waste a huge amount of time uselessly brooding on them. Alright, so from now on, catch your mind in the act when it tries to hook you with these questions and comments. Then simply refuse to play the game. Thank your mind for trying to waste your time and focus instead on some useful or meaningful activity. Thanks, mind, but I'm not playing today. So I hope that gives you a better idea of how the struggle switch got there in the first place. Our thinking self created it by telling us that uncomfortable feelings are bad or dangerous, that we can't cope with them, that we are defective or damaged for having them, that they will take over or overwhelm us, or that they will harm us in some way. If we fuse with these stories, the switch goes on, and we perceive uncomfortable emotions as a threat. And how does our brain respond to a threat? It activates the fight or flight response, which then gives rise to a whole new set of unpleasant feelings. Right? We've already talked about that. You're familiar with that. Think of it this way. Say a distant relative shows up at your doorstep. You've never met this relative before, but you've been told a lot of stories about her. You've been told that she's bad, that she's dangerous, that no one can stand her, that the only relationship she has is with damaged people, and that she always ends up hurting or damaging those people or taking control of them and ruining their lives. If you truly believed those stories, what would your attitude be towards this relative? Would you want her in your house? Would you want her anywhere near you? Of course not. You'd do anything you could to get rid of her as fast as possible. But what if all those stories were false or exaggerated? What if this relative were actually an okay person who just had been the victim of malicious gossip? The only way you'd ever find out would be to spend some time with her. Put aside all the gossip and slander and check her out for yourself. And the same goes with learning to handle unpleasant emotions. What you need to do is have a direct experience of them, to connect with them directly, rather than automatically believing the stories from your thinking self, from your mind. When you do this, you'll discover that those feelings are nowhere near as bad as you thought, and you'll realize they can't possibly harm you, control you, or overwhelm you. Now, sometimes when I say your emotions can't harm you, people mention the research that shows that chronic anger and depression can have bad effects on your physical health. The key word here is chronic, which means ongoing over a period of time. Painful emotions become chronic only when you keep the struggle switch on. When you stop struggling, they are free to move, and they generally do so fairly quickly. So when you respond to your emotions with acceptance, they don't become chronic, and therefore they don't hurt you. Acceptance breaks the vicious cycle of struggle and frees you to invest your time and energy in life-enhancing activities. And that's why in the next lesson, I'm going to teach you exactly how to do this. So we're going to learn how to make space for anxious feelings. I'm going to take you through the expansion technique. I'll see you there.